Nelson Mandela was born into the royal family of the Xhosa-speaking Thembu tribe on July 18, 1918, in the South African village of Mvezo. His father, Gadla Henry Mphakanyiswa, was a tribe counsellor. His mother, Nosekeni Fanny, was the third of 4 wives to Mphakanyiswa and born him 9 daughters and 4 sons together. Destined to be a chief, Mandela's father worked as a consultant for tribal chiefs for many years, but lost all his position and wealth over a conflict with the local colonial magistrate. Mandela, popularly known by his clan name, Madiba, was just a boy at the time, and the loss of his father's status compelled his mother to relocate the family to Qunu, an even smaller village north of Mvezo. The family stayed in huts and thrived on a local harvest of corn, sorghum, pumpkin, and beans, which was everything they could spare. Water came from lakes and springs, and cooking was done outside. Mandela's father died of lung cancer when he was just 9, forcing his life to change significantly. Chief Zongintaba Dalindyebo adopted him, the Thembu people acting regent, a move made as a concession to Mandela's father, who had suggested that Zongintaba be appointed chief years earlier. It was during this time that Madiba developed an interest in the history of Africa from the elder chiefs who came on official business to the Great Palace. He heard how the Africans had existed in relative harmony before the white settlers arrived. Madiba had been circumcised at age 16, an intricate rite of preparation for manhood. This was because an uncircumcised male, in African tradition, cannot inherit his father's wealth, marry, or officiate at tribal rituals. During the ceremonies, however, his mindset changed when Chief Melik Gwili, the principal speaker at the event, spoke sadly of the young men, stating that they were slaves in their land. Madiba would later say that while the words of the chief at the time did not make total sense to him, they would eventually articulate his resolve for an independent South Africa. The first in his family to obtain a formal education, Mandela finished his primary studies at a nearby missionary school. There, a teacher called him Nelson, as part of a tradition of assigning African students English names. He went on to attend the Clarkbury Boarding Institute, a Methodist high school, Health Town, where he excelled in boxing and tracking as well as academics. In 1939, Nelson joined the prestigious University of Fort Hare, the only Western-style higher learning institution at the time for South African blacks. He and several other students were sent home the next year, including his friend and future business associate, Oliver Tambo, for engaging in a boycott of university policies. Nelson moved to Johannesburg after discovering that his guardian had planned a marriage for him and served first as a night's watchman and then as a law clerk before obtaining his bachelor's degree by correspondence. He studied law at the University of Witwatersrand, where he was active in the anti-racial prejudice movement and formed crucial alliances with black and white activists. Nelson entered the African National Congress (ANC) in 1944 and collaborated with fellow members of the party, including Oliver Tambo, to create their youth league, the ANCYL. He met and married his first wife, Evelyn Ntoko Massey, that same year, with whom he had 4 children until their divorce in 1957. In 1961, Nelson Mandela co-founded and became Umkhonto we Sizwe's first chief, Spear of the Nation, also known as MK. Under the guidance of Mandela, MK launched a campaign of violence against the governments which had recently declared South Africa a republic and withdrawn from the British Commonwealth. Mandela traveled secretly overseas in January 1962 to join a meeting of African revolutionary leaders in Ethiopia, visit the exiled Oliver Tambo in London, and receive military training in Algeria. He was detained on August 5 shortly after his return and eventually sentenced to 5 years in jail for leaving the country and organizing a workers' strike in 1961. The following July, police raided an ANC hideout in Rivonia, a neighborhood on the outskirts of Johannesburg, and detained a racially diverse community of MK leaders who had come together to discuss the feasibility of a guerrilla uprising. Evidence was found implicating Mandela and other activists who were brought to trial for sabotage, treason, and violent hoax. Mandela and 7 other suspects barely escaped the gallows. They were instead jailed for life on June 12, 1964, during the so-called Rivonia trial, which lasted 8 months and gained significant international attention. Mandela's address from the dock, in which he acknowledged the truth of some of the accusations levied against him, was a classic defiance of liberty and defiance of tyranny. His speech was internationally recognized and published later that year as "I Am Prepared to Die." Nelson Mandela spent the first 18 of his 27 years in jail at the harsh Robben Island facility, a former lepers colony off the coast of Cape Town, where he was confined to a tiny cell without a bed or plumbing and compelled to perform hard labor in a lime quarry. He got scantier rations and fewer privileges as a black political prisoner than most prisoners. He was only permitted to see his wife, Winnie Madikizela Mandela, once every 6 months. Mandela and his fellow inmates were regularly subjected to inhuman treatment for the slightest offenses. Among other atrocities, there were reports of guards burying inmates up to their knees in the dirt and urinating on them. Notwithstanding their limitation and constraints, while in detention, Mandela acquired a bachelor's degree in law from London University and served as a mentor to his fellow inmates. He also smuggled secret political statements and a copy of his memoir, Long Walk to Freedom. Mandela became the charismatic face of the anti-apartheid movement amid his restrictions. In 1980, Oliver Tambo launched a Free Nelson Mandela movement that turned the jail leader into a household name and intensified the growing international outcry against the apartheid regime in South Africa. As pressure increased, the government offered Mandela his freedom in exchange for various political concessions, including the renouncement of violence and acceptance of the independent Transkei Bantustan, but he categorically refused their offers. The black nationalist was subsequently kept at the maximum security Pollsmoor prison until 1988, when, after being treated for tuberculosis, he was transferred to Victor Verster's prison near Pearl. There, Mandela was placed under house arrest on the grounds of a minimum security correctional facility. During his incarceration, Madiba retained strong support among the black populace of South Africa, and his imprisonment became a public concern amongst the international community that denounced apartheid. When the political condition in South Africa worsened after 1983, and particularly after 1988, the president's ministers engaged the freedom fighter in exploratory negotiations. In December 1989, he met and started discussions with the successor of Botha, de Klerk. In February 11, 1990, Mandela was freed from jail by the South African government under President de Klerk. Mandela was appointed vice president of the ANC shortly after his release. He became party president in July 1991. Mandela led the ANC in negotiations with de Klerk to end apartheid and bring about a peaceful transition into South Africa's non-racial democracy. In 1993, Mandela and President de Klerk were jointly awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for abolishing apartheid in South Africa. In April 1994, the Mandela-led ANC won the first universal suffrage election in South Africa. On May 10, as president of the country's first multi-ethnic administration, Nelson Mandela was sworn in. In 1995, he set up the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, TRC, which examined human rights violations under apartheid. He launched housing, education, and economic growth programs aimed at raising the living conditions of the black community in the region. In 1996, the nationalists chaired the implementation of a new constitution in South Africa, which formed a powerful central government founded on majority rule and outlawed discrimination against minorities, including whites. Improving racial ties, preventing blacks from retaliating against the white minority, and designing a new international image of a united South Africa were essential to President Mandela's priorities. To that end, he created a multiracial government of national unity and declared the country as a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world. In December 1997, Nelson Mandela quit his position with the ANC and passed the party leadership to his chosen successor, Thabo Mbeki. Mandela and Madikizela Mandela separated in 1996, and in 1998, Mandela married Graça Machel, the widow of Samora Machel, former president of Mozambique and Frelimo's leader. Nelson remained a lifelong advocate of peace and social justice in his own country and across the globe. Since leaving office, he set up a variety of organizations, including the prominent Nelson Mandela Foundation and the Elders, an autonomous community of public figures dedicated to addressing social challenges and alleviating human sufferings. In 2002, Nelson was a vocal advocate of AIDS awareness and rehabilitation initiatives in a society where the disease had been shrouded in stigma and ignorance. The disease later took his son, Magatho, 1950 to 2005, and is believed to impact more South Africans than in any other people. Treated for prostate cancer in 2001 and plagued by many health problems in his later years, Mandela became even more fragile and cut down his schedule on public appearances. In 2009, in recognition of the contributions of the South African leader in democracy, freedom, peace and human rights around the world, the United Nations declared July 18 Nelson Mandela International Day. On December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela died of a chronic lung infection. Mandela's writings and speeches were cooled in I Am Prepared to Die, 1964, reviewed and edited 1986, No Easy Walk to Freedom, 1965, updated in 2002, The Struggle is My Life, 1978, revised, edited in 1990, and in his own words, 2003. The Long Walk to Freedom Autobiography was published in 1994, which chronicles his early life and years in jail. Mandla completed and published a draft of his second volume of memoirs, which was posthumously released as Dare Not Linger, The Presidential Years, 2017. Mandela has been a controversial figure for most of his life. He earned worldwide recognition for his advocacy and is widely regarded as a symbol of social justice and democracy. In appreciation of his political accomplishments, he received over 250 awards, honors, grants, honorary degrees, and citizenships. He is the subject of a cult of personality and is held with deep respect in South Africa, where he is sometimes referred to by his Xhosa clan name, Madiba, and portrayed as the father of the nation. Thank you very much for watching our videos. We'll appreciate if you subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. We love you.